Hey there. Are you tired of waiting for the next episode of It's Probably Not Aliens? Well, we've got some good news for you. On Nebula, our streaming service, you can get access to all our episodes a week early. That's right, you'll never have to wait again to hear Scott and I debunk the latest ancient astronaut theory or get a movie fact wrong. But that's not all. Nebula is home to dozens of content creators we know you like, so you can find all your favorites in one place. Plus, we post content on there that you won't find anywhere else. And the best part? By signing up for Nebula at nebula.tv/probablyNotAliens, you're directly supporting the show and both of us. So don't wait any longer. Join Nebula today and listen to the next episode right after this one.
Powerful question. So we're talking about Jericho that could like tumble, break down walls and things like that. And obviously Hades Town has some that literally does it in the play. I think he moved, Orpheus can make walls move and mountains move and things. But what do you think is the most powerful song? I don't have an answer to this myself. I'm just curious.
I think obviously John Lennon's Imagine, but particularly the sort of COVID.
The Gal Gadot cover.
Because I was really worried about COVID, about contracting it, getting it.
Yeah.
Friends and family and everything, having to stay indoors. And then I heard that. And it just really turned things around for me. Everything was sort of fine after that. So that was
great. That was extremely powerful. That was, all of my favorite people came together and they I think did it better than John Lennon did. I think he'd be proud. I think so.
No one would be moved more than a bunch of people whose net worth is in 7 or 8 digits singing a song about how much better the world would be if nobody had any possessions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But you only have to imagine that, don't you? So it's sort of okay.
Yeah. You don't have to do it. That's too much.
It's sort of like, riddle me this.
Yeah.
In fact, I think John Lennon should have written the song, instead of calling it Imagine, should have called it Riddle Me This.
Riddle Me This.
And that was when John Lennon tried to defeat the Batman.
That's true.
A series of clues and riddles.
Do you wonder, did anyone ask sort of Yoko Ono or Paul McCartney or anyone what they thought of that?
What did they think of that? That's a good question. The only one who chimed in was Pete Best. He said thumbs up. 2 thumbs up from Pete Best.
I'm trying to remember. There's another song in that vein. It's this song that every time, I think it was originally made for a soccer thing.
Oh yeah.
But it's I have this concept of a guy in my head who only listens to this music that's designed by committees that are only for these large international events where everything has to be as bland and as corporate as possible.
Okay.
This, I think it's called Sing.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it's
the the movies, the animated movies,
something like that. It's not definitely not what's it called, the Lounge Lizard version of Seth MacFarlane as a mouse.
They did a thing. I can't remember whether it was the Queen's Platinum Jubilee or the one before, but they got Gary Barlow to write a song for that, which might have been called something. I don't know if it's the same thing you're thinking about, but had similar title. It was called Sing It or something like that.
Sing It.
And it was just the most bland song, because it sort of had to lean towards it being the Queen's Jubilee, but it couldn't be we all hail the hereditary monarch. So it has to be just kind of oh, things are nice, and it can't be so patriotic or whatever that it's kind of bad.
Yeah.
So it just ends up kind of being nothing. And I think it's just everyone sing, we're all singing together, and that's nice.
Everyone's
and that's
here.
Yeah.
It's sort of anytime they commission a song to be the theme song for a World Cup, it is the largest common denominator that you can possibly do, because you're making a song that is going to be played in literally every country on earth 1,000 times. So you have to be the widest possible appeal you can have. Other than that, it's just the obvious powerful songs that could take down cities, Three Doors Is Down Kryptonite.
Of course.
or Bad Day.
Had a bad day.
The
Yeah.
Alvin and the Chipmunks one. The Alvin and the Chipmunks
The Alvin
one
and
from the
Chipmunks
Alvin
one
and the Chipmunks
specifically.
film.
They hit that resonant frequency that can really tear down walls.
Yeah, Alvin and the Chipmunks invented Nightcore, if you really think about it. Anyways, this is a podcast.
This is a podcast called It's Probably Not Aliens. And usually there's two of us. But now there's three of us, and we'll introduce our special guest here in a second. But first, my name is Scott. I know nothing. I come into this show really just prepared with a soundboard. I've watched the TV show Ancient Aliens. I believe everything they tell me until I'm told otherwise by someone else on this show.
My name is Tristan Johnson, and I have been marinating in conspiracy theory and far-right nonsense since I was literally like 17 years old, debunking conspiracy theories as like a shitty 17-year-old new atheist. And I am now nearly 20 years into that process, and I'm somehow still at it, and I compulsively keep coming back to this well. And now I get to inflict this upon everybody that I know. But I'm really happy because we have a super cool guest today. One of the big stars who's got like a big fancy documentary coming out in a couple months. Tom Nicholas.
Hello. Thank you for having me. I'm also a person who also is coming into this knowing nothing, and I want to believe.
Yeah,
I want to believe.
Yes.
So my hope is that this is the twist episode where it, like, maybe not probably aliens, but maybe could be aliens.
Could be potentially.
So
it's the episode
really
where we
for
haven't
that.
ruled out aliens.
Yeah.
That's really what it is.
Okay, so let me try to get this for you. So this is what millions of people around the world reportedly believe.
We've got a stinger for it. Hit us with the claim, Tristan.
Okay. So we're deep into this season of talking about technology specifically.
Yes.
Now, as anybody who knows the Bible, not me, as we've well trotted at this point, that my Bible knowledge is terrible.
And that's a good starting point, too, because I grew up very religious. I don't know what your relationship with religion is, Tom, if you want to.
I grew up going to church.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say I have like a in-depth knowledge. I mean, I came into this thinking we were talking that the place we're about to talk about was a kind of mythical,
not real place,
which is bad. It's actually quite bad, I think, that I thought that. Particularly because I'm sure it's probably not a great place to be at the moment. But yeah, so I have some knowledge. I'm aware there were some walls and then there wasn't some walls. And I think they march around them, maybe.
Yeah. More like so. And just to like clarification, Tom, for me, I'm a very strange person because I have actually still never been to church as a 35-year-old man. Almost went to church during our hiatus because my friend's kid got baptized and wanted us to go. So I went to the old Anglican church, but then our 2-year-old got too upset because sitting still for a long time. So before things could even get started, I had to go take him to the park while the baptism happened. But either way, I was raised by like a new ager and stuff like that. So it's a whole weird thing.
Well, if you were raised super religious like me, you would know, Tristan, that church is not a place, it's a people. So as long as you were around those people, you went to church, my friend.
This was an Anglican church, so it was not a people, it was a place.
All right, never mind.
It was very specific, consecrated ground with a beginning and an end.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. But yeah, so basically, from what I can pick up, this is what I picked up through the story, is basically like, in the Old Testament, there's a section of the Old Testament where basically it's about destroying local city-states, and then that's a good thing. Sort of like just a section of the sort of Old Testament is just the story of basically the founding of the sort of ancient kingdom of Israel, which involved basically going to the sort of local city-states around and defeating them in glorious combat through the glory of God and everything. Old Testament stuff. And Jericho was one of these examples because it was a city that had very powerful walls that kept it from being attacked.
Like a Ba Sing Se.
Yeah, like a Ba Sing Se, exactly. So just like that, they used fire-powered drill device. I don't know. It was like, the long story short is that Israelites prayed to God, and they had this idea that if they do a chant and they blow horns and they walk around the city walls every day, blowing their horns and doing their chant, that faith would come through. And it didn't for like 7 days, but on the 7th day they blew the horn, and it was so loud that it blew down the walls of Jericho, and then they were able to gloriously defeat the Jerichoans in combat, and God is great, isn't things awesome? And so like that's sort of the story. But did you know that might not be a story about why having faith in God will have you prevail in even the most hardest of things to overcome.
Okay.
But instead is a gift from the aliens, where through what we have already established previously in the show, the nuclear power plant that is the Ark of the Covenant.
Ark of the Covenant is nuclear power. We know that. We've talked about that before in a previous episode. So just to catch you up, Tom.
Yeah.
This, I feel like I've come in episode 5 now, but I can catch up.
Yeah.
You have to get the lore here. And that they used that power to power a sonic weapon device like the ones that we use for crowd control today.
Yes.
But one so powerful that it blew down the walls of Jericho.
You said we used them as though each of us has a sonic device that we personally use for crowd control when, people gather up.
By we, I mean the humans, I guess. The humans
the royal
use this gift from the aliens.
I've got one. I've got a sonic device all loaded up on top of my house just in case I get, too many people walking by. If the mailman comes by and I don't have a package, that's not for me, mailman. Go away. You're at the wrong house.
So that's the claim we're having today.
Yes. And in case Tristan this is the thing, Tom. Tristan is very, he'll get in here with his facts and his knowledge and things like that and try to debunk everything. And he's got all these, he might even read the claim with a little, dismissively, So here's how the actual show, Ancient Aliens, describes this.
To religious scholars, the collapse of Jericho's walls was a miracle. To most modern-day scientists and historians, the destruction was most probably caused by an earthquake. But could it have been something else? Could the Israelites have possessed advanced sound wave technology? If so, where did it come from?
Good question.
Very
It's always worth asking. It's always worth asking, I think.
You have to set up. You have to set up a hypothetical.
Archaeologists say a very normal thing, but what if it was a stupid thing instead?
Yeah. What if it was advanced technology, and if it was, so you have to buy into that already. Where did it come from?
Yeah. So I'm going to bring into, not only is Ancient Aliens probably wrong on the sonic weapon front, but they're even a little bit wrong on the archaeology standpoint of that. So I just want to delve into what's going on and really bring this out and then in my very Tristan fashion, just give you way more than you actually wanted or needed or even desire to know about this situation and Jericho and sonic weapons and all that stuff.
Yeah. So I imagine we'll be talking about the book, the Bible, the good book, a little bit.
Yep. I know that you've been sitting on a Veggie Tales clip that because apparently they made Veggie Tales, by the way, a like evangelical Christian early 3D animated show featuring vegetables.
Yep.
That teach you about God.
Yeah,
I'm familiar with Veggie Tales.
We all love Veggie Tales here.
That made it over.
Excellent.
Great. That's great. The great exploit.
The pirates
who don't do anything, right? Does that?
Yeah.
Is that song?
The cucumber. Yeah, I'm on board.
Oh yeah, Jericho's the catchiest song, it's one of the catchiest songs. I'll play a little bit right now, just to sort of pretend that we're in a Sunday school now before Tristan gives us the facts. So here's the happy catchiest Veggie Tales song.
Keep walking, but you won't knock down our wall. Keep walking, but she isn't gonna fall. It's plain to see your brains are very small. To think walking will be knocking down our wall.
It's so good. Those are little peas. And all the peas,
German hoedown.
All the peas are sort of vaguely European.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's definitely an accent.
Yeah,
but who's to say what?
Whose accent?
If anybody is watching the Dropout shows, it was that vaguely European pop star that Anna Garcia played on.
Yeah,
people.
Yeah. Princess Emily.
What's your accent? European.
Yeah, where from? Yes, smack in the middle of it, smack in the dab.
So let's go over the story. So basically, the Israelites, under Joshua's leadership, arrive at the city of Jericho, this fortified city with robust walls that has sealed itself off from threats. City's completely shut. No, yeah.
And sorry, who are the P's? Just to...
Oh, sorry, the P's are the people of Jericho.
Oh, okay, so the P's are
they're
inside.
saying
Okay.
they're saying you can't knock down our wall. Keep walking around, Joshua. And all your friends, but you're not gonna walk. You're not gonna knock down our wall. It's
you
too
cannot
good.
walk around the wall. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Their brains are very
safe
small.
in their little pod.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the city's completely shut. No one can enter or leave because they're under siege by the Israelites.
Mm-hmm.
Then God commands Joshua to have the Israelite soldiers and 7 priests with trumpets made from ram's horns, which is still a significant thing in Judaism today.
Mm-hmm.
Basically go around the city for 6 days, blowing these trumpets. The Ark of the Covenant, which was a sacred chest that contains the 10 Commandments, was to also be carried around the city. The 10 Commandments being basically the contract between God and humans,
Mm-hmm. And also a nuclear power plant.
And also a nuclear power plant.
Yeah.
Some say it is a symbol of the deep relationship that the Israelites and the Jews have with God that is sacred and special to them. Others say it's a nuclear power plant. Who's to say which is right?
Who can say?
Yeah. On the 7th day, though, the procedure changes dramatically. The Israelites are instructed to circle the city 7 times. And at the end of the 7th lap, the priests are to blow their trumpets, and the soldiers are to shout loudly. Following these actions, a miracle occurs. The walls of Jericho miraculously collapse, allowing the Israelites to charge into the city and capture it. And it's portrayed as basically a divine intervention to deliver the city into the hands as promised.
In fact, I'll cut ahead to the very end of the Veggie Tales thing. So this is sort of how it is, very triumphantly.
Here's the Veggie Tales version.
Here's the Veggie Tales version of it.
Hello, my name is Joshua, and God has given us this land.
Sounds like a South Park character.
Yeah. So that's how excited everyone is. Everyone cheers and claps, and that's after the wall fell. So
yeah, now I don't know if this makes it into the Veggie Tales version of events, but after that they enter the city, sack it, and they carry out a total destruction, sparing only a single person who in the entire city, a prostitute named Rahab, who helps the Israelite spies during their reconnaissance mission.
Ray.
So I don't know if they did a part where they're making mushy peas or anything like that, but
I don't think so. I think the peas just run away.
Okay.
They're off to do something else now.
Or they're like, it turns out we're happy this has happened. Actually, it was all a big
there's
misunderstanding.
Plenty of room for everyone in here. Now that the walls are gone, we've opened up the floor plan a lot.
Open concept city now. So afterwards, Joshua pronounces a curse on anyone who attempts to rebuild Jericho, or specifically the wall. A curse that's later fulfilled in the narrative of the Hebrew Bible when a man named Hiel rebuilds Jericho at the cost of his sons' lives. But some ancient alien theorists suggest that the Ark of the Covenant contained technology that amplified the sound so loud that it destroyed the walls. That the ram's horns were amplified, the sound waves from the horns were amplified so loud that they were able to destroy the walls using some kind of technology that we don't know today, like the most loud megaphone in history. And and the only way that you could power that much amplification, Bart Simpson with the line of megaphones to say testing, was with nuclear power, specifically the Ark of the Covenant, which in UFO ancient aliens lore we determined is a nuclear power plant. Hence why it melts people's faces and stuff when you look at it.
Now you say some ancient astronaut theorists believe this, but I want to play this is the episode I have the most clips for, just because of Veggie Tales and stuff. But I want to play one of my favorite ancient astronaut theorist, because I just love listening to him, and I could listen to him all day. So here's him talking about it.
The idea that some kind of sonic weapon was used to destroy these huge, thick, ancient walls to allow the Israelites to basically take over that city is a fascinating one. It sounds utterly fantastic to us that they could have had some kind of advanced alien technology. It's clearly what they're describing.
It's clearly what they're describing. That's David Childress, my favorite guy on Ancient Aliens.
Self-described, as described by others, as a modern-day Indiana Jones.
Yes, he never describes himself as Indiana Jones. He describes himself as being described by others as a modern-day Indiana Jones.
He's a humble man.
He's a humble man.
Like, the internet says people describe him as a modern-day Indiana Jones, and then the source is his website. That's like...
Also, by modern-day Indiana Jones, does he also think Indiana Jones was real? Is that...
Listen, I don't know if we've gotten there yet, but...
It doesn't say real life Indiana Jones. It says modern day Indiana Jones. That's funny. That's really good.
Oh, boy. Okay, so... but let's get into like breaking down all these things. But first, I need to talk about a very important message. We need to talk about the importance of both products and services.
Products and services. This is a little ad break we do. It's going to be instant for us, but people might listen to something on the other end. But let's see what we have to advertise, if anything. That's just our little middle stinger bit.
Oh, it's nice.
You should definitely just forward all your paychecks to whatever it was that we just advertised.
Yeah, or us directly.
It'd be amazing if what was just advertised was an ancient sonic Bluetooth speaker delivered from space. It'd just be really good integration, wouldn't it? It would just be perfect.
It would be it's just a perfect thing for us to yeah, absolutely.
See, like, thing is, right before the show, even before you got on the call, Tom, I was complaining to Scott about how annoying Bluetooth technology can be with pairing and everything like that. Can you imagine, like, back then they had access to Bluetooth that actually worked so much that you could use it as a weapon? Jeez. Yeah. How do I get that?
Well,
or there's like an issue where they're like, no, it's like, there's no phones. Or they're trying to pair the alien technology to their like horns, and they're like, oh, it's like, it's not working.
Well, that's why it took 7 days.
Bluetooth on the other horn.
That's why it took 7 days, Tristan.
Yeah. So not only
6 days of troubleshooting, and then finally they got it on the 7th.
So the first thing that comes to mind that people talked about when they brought up the story of Jericho, and specifically when they said that archaeologists believe that the walls were taken down by an earthquake. Mm-hmm. There's something a little they're not only wrong on like that story potentially, but wrong on the idea of this event actually happening. So you were talking about like so Jericho definitely did exist. Mm-hmm. The main issue is that given the timelines we know about history in this period, it was likely that Jericho had been destroyed and abandoned a very long time by the time the ancient Israelites actually arrived in that region.
Oh.
So the walls had tumbled down centuries earlier, basically.
So they sort of rocked up and they were like, oh, the walls aren't. They were like, should we just, when we go back, should we just say we did that? We'll claim that one, right? Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
It's like the meme that's like what's it called? Time did this. I did this. So most of this comes from a archaeologist by the name of Kathleen Kenyon, who did an excavation at Jericho in the 1950s, and suggested that at the time of Joshua's conquest of the city, that it was probably uninhabited. So I'll go through this. So the excavations happened at Tel Es Sultan, which is the site of ancient Jericho, and her expedition ran from 1952 to 1958, and was a world famous like piece of archaeology, of biblical archaeology, and did a lot of breakthroughs in like the methodology of doing archaeology in this period in the Levant, and focused on doing what's called detailed stratigraphic detail, which is like basically very slowly digging down through layers to get an idea of the chronology of the site.
Yeah.
So
learning from rocks and things.
Yeah. So she demonstrated there that the walls had been dated to around 1400 BCE, that the walls had dated to 1400 BCE and attributed to Joshua's invasion were actually 1300 years older than that, and were probably destroyed sometime in the early Bronze Age, which was sometime around 2700 BCE. So again, over 1,000 years before the time that Joshua arrived in the region.
Yeah, they weren't just like a little late to it based off of this research. They were over 1,000 years late to it.
Exactly. And it's possible that when they found Jericho, like what they might be referring to and what might have been integrated in was like an old legend, which might have referred to an earthquake, kind of in the way that when we talked about Sodom and Gomorrah, that there's some evidence that it was actually like not a meteor strike, but like the air blast that comes from when a meteor gets into the atmosphere, and it creates like a big air blast that breaks up a bunch of stuff and cause a bunch of destruction of a town, which then would become this sort of legend in the local lore. And then as like the stories are being amalgamated into texts like the Bible, that sort of story got like integrated into the overall legendarium.
Gotcha.
So, and that's the first time I ever got to say legendarium.
I was gonna say I've never heard that word before, but it's such a good word.
You got it in so smoothly. It was
beautiful.
Like
I thought you had said that every day of your life.
Yeah.
Oh boy, to have a life like that. At the time, that was historically possible for Joshua's invasion, which was again 1150 BCE. Jericho was probably very small, which means that they were probably people living in the ruins of a major city in the past.
The peas had gone ages ago.
Yeah.
There's just like an empty pod.
All they found were empty pods.
Yeah. The technique used to basically do this was something called the Wheeler-Kenyon method, and done specifically to study Middle Eastern mud brick archaeology, was the part that made the key analysis that broke through the way. So she was able to do a new methodology that figured out just how old these walls were, and found that was like the big story, that they were actually a lot older than we thought in the past.
Yeah.
But it found some even more interesting history about the site of Jericho, because there's evidence in Jericho that people had been living in that area going as far back as 10,000 BCE, which makes it one of the oldest settlements in human history.
That's cool.
This region obviously.
Imagine if you bought a house in Jericho in 10,000 BCE.
Oh boy.
That's an investment. Now.
Yeah. Just like one, landlord. The only problem is that, by the time you're 12,000 years old, you're like, what are you going to spend the money on anymore? You're already retired.
You're settled.
You can't rebuild the walls.
Can't rebuild
the walls because that's cursed. So
it's cursed, yeah. You lost all your kids trying to rebuild the wall. So, yeah. So, there have been some criticisms of her methods, specifically that they're time consuming, and so that they can only really be done in small areas. So she only was able to do a small area of the site and publish only a few papers about her excavations before she died in 1978. And then she's also known as one of the most influential archaeologists of the 20th century, because not only did she do this, she did another set of excavations in Jerusalem from 1961 to 1967. So she's a very legit archotologist.
If anyone's going to take the title of modern day Indiana Jones, this other guy, he's like. She's like, I dug up Jerusalem,
Kathleen Kenyon. Her name's Kathleen. So.
Kathleen, she's gonna be the real life Indiana Jones, not David Childress. Get out of here.
And so, since she did this, since the main thing that has opened up some space to allow for a more biblical interpretation is the fact that because she was so meticulous and so she focused on being so detail oriented and slow, which if anyone knows anything about doing archaeology, is that it is a very slow process.
Yeah.
She ended up basically doing 10 years and not really getting a whole lot of work done and only really being able to publish a few things before she died on the site, which means that there's a lot of Jericho's sites still left to dig. And that leaves, and as you know, in circles, when there is question marks or ambiguities, you can fill it in with whatever you want. So other archaeologists have tried to argue that there's evidence at the site that still supports the biblical narrative. The most prominent one being an archaeologist named Brian Wood, who's like a Near Eastern scholar. Tried to make the argument that the biblical account of Jericho going down, the walls coming down around 1400 BCE, was like, there's like an attempt to try and like reinterpret everything to fit that narrative that came out in a 1990 issue of Biblical Archaeology Review, based on looking at ceramic data, stratigraphy, some evidence from scarabs, and radiocarbon dating, like a bunch of things that are very typical in the archaeologist handbook. For example, one of the things that kind of comes out, like this, I was like, I need to know exactly. When I read that, I was like, I need immediately to know what scarab evidence is.
Yeah, tell me about the scarabs.
I thought it was going to be like looking at like the pattern of like breeding or something like that with local dung beetles, which were called scarabs. But no, it's actually like looking at like the beetle-shaped amulets, because ancient Egyptian culture really like venerated scarabs. And because they represented rebirth, regeneration, and protection. And so because of that, they became this sort of magical seal or amulet that then spread across the region. And so kind of like, like with like an all-seeing eye or something like that, having a scarab amulet would actually be like a symbol of protection that people might adopt, even if they weren't Egyptian. So, but the thing is, they were so ubiquitous and they kind of went through different styles and trends that you might be able to look at these scarab amulets, and through their like design or their inscriptions, you can kind of start to point to times where there might be connections in different regions.
Yeah.
So for
this
instance,
is a boomer scarab and this is a Gen Z scarab.
Exactly.
Yeah, I get you.
So like some scarabs at the site show names of Egyptian pharaohs like Hatshepsut, Tutmosis III, or Amenhotep III, which could actually help date the layers and suggest that there was active trade between Jericho and Egypt during this time.
Interesting.
And through this, and so in this 1990 paper, he describes Jericho as having a two-tiered wall system that consisted of stone-faced earth revetment, topped with mud brick parapet walls, and that this wall collapsed outward, potentially providing a ramp for the Israelites to enter the city as described in the Bible. So there's like evidence. He's pointing out that there's some other evidence that shows that it's possible that there was a wall at the time of the Israelites arriving. Yeah, they just built another wall.
Yeah.
And so so like the big thing is that if you look at the timing of the attack, it might have happened just after harvest, because there's evidence of a short siege, which indicated that there were large quantities of grain stored in the ruins, which again matches the Bible's description of the duration and timing of the siege.
Okay.
And so Wood argues that the lack of evidence of the city being plundered and signs of a citywide fire also align with the biblical account, which states that the city was burned but not plundered. Okay. So, despite this presentation,
I was going to say this seems like we've got some two people arguing back and forth with different evidence. Do we have any sort of conclusion now, or
do you
consensus?
have the scarabs?
Do you have the scarabs, Tristan? Do you personally have them?
I want to see the scarabs.
Show me the scarabs, Tristan.
I don't have the scarabs on me, unfortunately. And Kathleen Kenyon was, of course, dead by the time this paper came out, so she couldn't defend herself. But the thing is that the closest I can come to in very archaeologist fashion is that despite this, fairly like this isn't like pseudo archaeology, like this is a person using like real evidence and such.
It's no ancient aliens.
But what I have picked up is that Wood's conclusions are still fairly skeptical. Like people are still fairly skeptical, and there are still some like cautions with scholars, because it's like, it seems like he went a little bit too far to show up that everything lines up just right with the Bible.
Sure.
And that Wood's evidence is more showing that there's a lot more work to do because there's a lot of stuff that we don't know about this site and its history throughout time, than like a confirmation of the biblical account. So from what I can figure out is that scholars today who study Jericho as part of their focus are still kind of divided, and that I think that one of the major things in archaeology overall, because it's a severely underfunded discipline, is that they have more questions than answers, and to get answers would require a lot of money that they have trouble getting. So
A lot of digging.
A lot of digging. Yeah.
The brushing. They sort of do a lot of brushing, don't they?
Brushing. What's with the brushing?
Take so long.
Yeah.
It's too much.
You gotta like, yeah, because you think about it, you have to like carefully dig very, very small amounts, and keep in mind you're like collecting samples of the dirt for other types of scientific analysis. Then when you also have to dig in a way so that you are not accidentally damaging things that are extremely fragile, and not only not damaging them, but making sure they don't even move. Because what's almost as important as the artifact itself is the position in which it's found. Because if you take an artifact out of its location without documenting it, you have like lost like half of its value.
I don't know about that. Indiana Jones was pretty cavalier about that. He was like, I'm going to just take whatever artifacts I can find. It belongs in a museum, Tristan.
Yeah, there's going to be that. Yeah, there's been many people with suits like Indiana Jones, mostly with British accents, honestly, who said stuff like that. And now and now, like, you know, you have the British Museum, the world's largest open air crime scene.
It belongs in a museum, specifically our museum.
Our museum. Yeah. Yeah, 100%.
There would be a great follow-up where, like, after the scene in like the Raiders of the Lost Ark where he escapes from the stone thing with the gold monkey, where then he's like in front of an ethics committee for like doing like this illegal expedition and like taking all this stuff out. The other part too, the thing though, that it's like there's like so like it's very up in the air even whether or not Jericho's walls even existed at the time that it happened, that the Bible says that the walls fell. The second part is that, and this part shouldn't be the most controversial with this group, is that the idea of making a sonic weapon powerful enough to destroy a city is also what I found is scientifically dubious. Is the nicest way I can say it. So because of the timelines of things, we haven't talked about this in the show yet because of recording out of order and such, but we do have today modern sonic weapons, the most common being the long-range acoustic device, which are LRADs, which are used for what are called less lethal weaponry, which is the way that modern day countries have basically been investing money into trying to find ways that the police can do violence on groups of people protesting without killing them, or at least killing them at a lower frequency. This is like things like tasers and stun guns. But like you see, like in modern day, you've got weird things like bolo guns that shoot like high speed bolos that can like tie up somebody's hands and legs. And and because they still kill people, they tend to, the police would call them non-lethal weapons. And people who study these things call them less lethal weapons because there's stories of people dying of being tased all the time.
Yeah.
But one of the ideas that was designed to try and disperse crowds trying to protest for, I don't know, higher wages or something like that, is to blast them with high volume sound that would cause, you know, hearing, like, you know, like make your ears hurt. And sometimes like the air can vibrate in a way that it makes your skin kind of feel like it's burning, and enough to make you just feel like super uncomfortable to leave.
Yeah.
Fun, huh?
Yeah, it's
Nasty.
fun. They show this in the show Ancient Aliens. They like demonstrate it as well. And the only note I have about that scene is that when they were showing like footage of like riot police using the LRAD sonic weapon, I don't know what the protest was that they were interfering in, but there was at least one person wearing a Captain America shield on their back, and I thought that was rad. So props to that person.
The person shooting the weapon, or
being shot at by the weapon. Had a Captain America.
Yeah.
You'd think you would just use the shield, right? But they just had it on their back.
Maybe they took the inspiration because they used a super LRAD in what was it? the Edward Norton Hulk movie, right?
Oh, they
like,
did.
There's a scene where they use like a thing, right? And he tears a tank in half and uses the two sides of the tank as gloves to beat up the thing.
That's a good movie, man. Underrated.
Underrated for sure. But like, yeah, so like these exist. They're used, even like one of the most like examples of what's called hostile design or hostile architecture, which is like a way to discourage people from having a third space in cities. Basically, like there's a scourge in cities of people being places and not spending money while being there, and they have done a bunch of urban design to try and prevent people from doing that. And one of them is that stores, to discourage teenagers from hanging out, will play high-pitched sounds that are high enough pitch that adults can't hear it anymore, but teenagers can. And so it's like annoying to be near a store because teenagers famously have tons of money and can go places and hang out and spend.
Yeah. Hanging out, which I think they sort of call antisocial behavior.
Yeah.
What it
Like
probably
hanging out
is
with
just
your friends.
social behavior. Yeah.
Juvenile delinquents. There's a scourge.
I remember there was a thing in the UK maybe a year or so ago where a local city council had posted a thing to their like Twitter or Facebook page, and it was like, thank you to the local police force for helping us remove this park bench, which had become a focus for antisocial behavior. And kids kept sitting on the bench, so they just
Oh my
took
gosh.
the bench
How
away.
could they sit on a bench and just hang? It's ridiculous.
I think it was also the fact there was like a photo of it that was like, we're really proud that we've done that. We're really serving our community here.
This is better for everyone.
If you're sitting on a bench, you're socializing and, developing as a person, and you're not spending money, which is the point of human existence. So therefore you can't do it. They should be at home spending Robux.
If they're not being productive, they gotta spend money, and those are the two things that you have to do in this life. And if you're not doing that, if you're just hanging out, get out of here. We don't want you. It's ridiculous.
So here's a couple things that would make the using a sonic weapon to destroy a city part a little bit complicated, and I think we're going to talk about this in a future episode in more detail. But it's the main thing that the amount of energy that you would need to put into sound waves to destroy rocks will very quickly, before it gets to the point of destroying rocks, first destroy eardrums and then destroy human flesh.
They talk about this in the show too. So like which was wild to me. They basically talked about how like they had like a physicist on talking about the ability, the sound waves and sonic weaponry and things like that. And they talked about how like really you can only use sonic things for like tiny adjustments rather than like he had a device that was like this little styrofoam ball can hover, and it's like, but if you want to do anything more than that, then you're gonna need a completely different device. Like if you want to move it a bigger thing, you got to do anti-gravity. Whereas sonic things are just meant for little tiny adjustments because they could just kill everyone by the time they are able to destroy a wall. It's like Doctor Who's got a sonic screwdriver, right? It's a tool that builds, it doesn't destroy.
I feel like we're laying on the British very thick for Tom. Like,
it's true.
What if Doctor Who
cultural references that I'll
Mr.
understand.
Bean showed up to do things?
Yeah.
Imagine you're in the pub.
Imagine you're drinking a beer that is 27 degrees Celsius and having an Alka-Pop. So God, last time I was in the UK was 2007, and they were saying Alka-Pops, and I'm like, I don't know if that's a word they use anymore, because
that was like that. That was a big antisocial moral panic, actually. Alka-Pops, which, to be fair, were just like, imagine if Orangeade was really boozy, or the most famous one was like Blue.
Oh,
you know how like some sweets and drinks and stuff, they're just like, oh, we've got all the flavors. We've got strawberry, we've got lemon, we've got blue.
We've got blue. We've got blue.
Yeah,
flavor.
the biggest Alka-Pop was Blue. I don't know if they drank much of it in Jericho.
No, probably not.
They hadn't invented Alka-Pops yet. That was part of their downfall. But yeah, the thing is that like while like sonic weapons do have like a thing of being like a less lethal, or at least like, will only make people deaf rather than kill them, which I guess is an upgrade. But like, yeah, like to the point where you're dealing with like sonic waves so strong that you could destroy rocks, the structural integrity of like the people using that weapon, or like the device that would need to emit those sound waves, is starting to become an issue. And like it feels like like you could liquefy the people in the town before you could deal with like the rocks. It's like the amount of energy needed is immense. And like
Mushy
there
peas.
are other options for taking down like the thing is,
You try
You're
some
gonna
other
see-
things first. Yeah.
Yeah.
you try some other things first. For example, a siege, which was a common occurrence in those times, where the people on the
Interesting.
outside just don't let people get in and out, and eventually at a point they get so hungry that they decide to cry uncle and let you in. That's typically a thing that works.
Okay.
Or just like, I don't know if we're at that point in technology in this period, but like throwing really big rocks at it with a catapult or something.
Now in the
but
Veggie Tales one, they they didn't fight, obviously, because that's not how it works in the Bible. But the Jericho people would dump slushies on Joshua and his folks. So they had slushies at the very least, according to Veggie Tales.
Well, that actually might be referring to an actual common thing during sieges. It's just some of the ways they would defend themselves is doing stuff like taking like vats of oil and boiling them and like throwing them off the side of the wall onto the people sieging to like scald and burn
Very
the people
similar.
who are
Yeah.
We'll talk about that because actually is key in the episode we're going to do with Dale.
Excellent.
But yeah, like so like the idea is that sonic weapons, they have a particular use that makes sense. When you get to the point where you're talking about in the same way of like hovering something with sound, to the point where you can actually use it to do something that involves like destruction, there are other ways that would be way easier to use. Like even if you had sci-fi technology,
Sure.
using like a laser or even a catapult would be like a more energy efficient. Like if the aliens wanted to like help the Israelites take down the wall, instead of giving them a sonic device, which sound is famously really hard to focus and drive, and also has a like really small effective range, instead give them the trebuchet.
Give them the trebuchet.
Or even better yet, the thing that really killed the idea of cities with walls, which is cannons. Just give them some of those.
Give them some
and
cannons.
with way less sci-fi technology, they could still have a way more effective weapon to use things.
Yeah.
I hadn't really thought much about motivation. I do like the idea that the aliens came down, saw this one particular siege, got really invested in that,
Super
and who
into
won.
it. Yeah.
We're like, oh, we need the outside people. We want them to get in, and then we're like, we're done here.
Yeah.
Our work here is done. Thank you very much.
We did it. Good job,
We have to
gang.
go now.
Yeah, there's all sorts of stuff about the Old Testament where the aliens would interfere in interesting ways. Like we talked about the Ark of the Covenant being a nuclear power plant, a nuclear reactor. There was manna.
This was used to fuel the manna machine.
The manna
so they could
machine,
eat while they were in the desert for 40 years.
which was like a kind of algae that they could eat theoretically. It's all sorts of like weird. The aliens just being like, "Hey, you guys seem like you're struggling. We can help you out, but barely." With something very specific.
Just enough.
Enough.
Yeah. And what I think is very amusing about this is that like these aliens are advanced enough that they can warp the laws of physics enough to travel at superluminal speeds so that they can violate everything we know about how the universe and time function, so that they could travel to this planet. And then their first obvious thing is to, one, take a very involved side of one war happening on the planet.
Yeah.
And two, intervene by giving them the most energy inefficient style of technology you possibly can imagine for doing this one task. Because I feel like if you can travel faster than the speed of light, you can probably figure out gunpowder. And and gunpowder, as we have learned by my source being history, has been extremely good at destroying walls. If And if that wasn't true, we'd all be speaking Byzantine right now. Because the most famous example, I think, in history is that the city of Constantinople had these impenetrable walls that, like, stood for centuries and centuries. And the only way the Turks actually eventually took them down was by making an extremely big cannon.
Big gun.
Yeah, and it's sort of like that fall of Constantinople is sort of like the sign of the some people, it's not, there'd be like a lot of like speculation on this, but or not speculation, but a lot of like, it's not an academic answer, but it's like like an easy enough one to say, is that like the fall of Constantinople, which happened pretty close to the fall of the Muslim kingdom of Granada, which also happened relatively close to the sailing of Christopher Columbus, is like that sort of like those like events are sort of like the things pointed to as like this is the end of the medieval age.
Yeah. As
like, you're entering into a new world. But the other thing too is that like you have to look at these devices, like the Ark of the Covenant, despite in the Bible is referred to as, again, it's a chest that contains the 10 Commandments, which is supposed to be a symbol in the Holy of Holies in the innermost temple, kept to be a symbol of God's presence amongst the Jews.
Mm-hmm.
And today there is one church that claims to still have it. And it is the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. There is a temple in Ethiopia where there's a guy who claims that he protects the Ark of the Covenant there today.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of those things where I'm like, the more I learn about Ethiopian Christianity, the more I'm like endlessly fascinated by it. They have a because they're outside of like the typical, like Christianity came to Ethiopia really early, and then the sort of Mediterranean world developed Christianity like as we know it today, with like Catholicism and Orthodox and like all the things. The Ethiopians kind of like were separate and they did their own thing, but like they adopted Christianity really early in its history. And so their version of Christianity is like really unique compared to other ones. And I'm like I think they're called like, it's like Egyptian Coptic Christianity type stuff. And it's like, I every time I like, because there's some stuff that involves claims like the Queen of Sheba was Ethiopian and like married Solomon. And so there's some people who claim like the royal family of Ethiopia has like a bloodline that goes back to King Solomon. And it's there's some really cool stuff that happens there. Either way, there's not a lot of despite in my mind, I think that a lot of people would agree is that whether or not the Ark of the Covenant or the 10 Commandments tablets actually physically existed is sort of secondary to what they represent in Judaism, which is that they represent the covenant between the Jews and God.
Yeah. And
that it's like, because it's a contract. It is, the stone tablets say, God says do these things, and if you do that, God will protect you. The Old Testament, if you want to like boil it down, is that being established and then the Jews not following it and God getting super fucking pissed and doing doing bad stuff to
basically
them sort of because there's like I feel like there's like several stories in the Bible that is like a prophet said that we're not being good servants of God correctly, and no one listened to him, and then God did a really bad thing in punishment. And sort of
basically
I've read the Bible once, and it was a version called The Bible Abridged Beyond All Possible Usefulness, where they had taken every single book of the Bible and condensed it down to a single sentence.
That's pretty good.
I think it was made by the guy who makes like Saturday morning breakfast cereal. I can't remember, like Zach Wienersmith, I think his name is.
Could I recommend Veggie Tales to you?
When I was a kid, I had a friend who was like, he was like involved with like evangelical stuff. And he tried to get me to watch Veggie Tales when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And when my mom found out that I was going to my friend's house and watching Veggie Tales, she was very much like, oh, you can't be friends with that person anymore.
It's so funny too, because Veggie Tales is like 50%, like sometimes they will do stories from the Bible. Sometimes they'll just do stories that have a moral, like it's not good to lie. But then they do close it out by being like, and here's the evidence why it's not good to lie from like a couple verses from the Bible. But for like most of it, you're watching just like a cartoon of vegetables learning that it's not a good thing to lie.
And the songs are
and
good.
the songs are
slappers,
bangers.
I do remember God is bigger than the boogeyman. That one got stuck in my head for a while. But the thing is, I think my parents were more just like upset that like this random family was trying to like reach to their kids when they went over to a friend's house to play.
That's fair.
So yeah, but it's like the thing is that like there's a lot of stories in the Bible of the Ark of the Covenant, like, you know, killing those who dared touch it or who like, you know, who looked at it and stuff like that, which has
because it's radioactive, like
that, then the radioactive and stuff like that. And furthermore, like the other thing too is that I think that the story of Jericho, like the idea that like they could only have thought to use a sonic weapon by like the whole idea of like sound taking down Jericho, not really mentioning that the inspiration of the story of Jericho and like the sound thing might have to do with more that sound is a thing that has been used in warfare and religion throughout history. Sounds used to coordinate movements, to signal attacks, to intimidate enemies. And there could be like, you could say there was like, you could see a story where like a siege was taken down by like them, like, you know, the ritual and the preaching like convince them to open the doors or something like that, or like or intimidate them or something like that. And that could have been then used to like, then like you can metaphorically say that they used the sound of our chants brought down the walls. And so
be like, didn't expect that to work, but it did.
Wow.
Turns out it just blew the horn, and it just
we just all gathered around and sang John Lennon's Imagine, and they let us in. That was awesome.
Man, we got full circle. But yeah, like religious ceremonies often use sound as a conduit. Like in various religious ceremonies, sound like chants or songs, like there's various situations where sound is seen to be a conduit to the divine or the spiritual realm. I even think that now I'm getting this entirely from a Leonard Cohen song, but I do know that there is a part of the Bible that talks about like music being like there's sacred sounds in the Bible and stuff like that too.
Yeah,
I think that like there's a reason why there's so many root fifth intervals in like music, is because there's actually in Christianity and Judaism there's something kind of holy about the root fifth.
Yeah,
don't quote me on that because I'm not a Bible scholar, but I do think that there's a story there somewhere.
I think David plays some music. That is a thing. I can't remember.
Yeah. But
David
really
played a secret chord.
It goes like this: the fourth, the fifth,
the minor fall, the major lift. Yeah.
I think we're all going from the same source here.
We're all going from the same guy.
Biblical scholar Leonard Cohen.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, he might have been raised with that because he's a Jew from Montreal, or he was. He's not alive anymore, but he's a Jewish person from Montreal. Which means that like he was probably raised with like, you know, Hebrew Bible stuff as a kid, right? So story could have come from somewhere. But yeah, it's like that's like what sound can actually do physically instead of like emotionally or like, you know, psychologically has been what I would say overplayed in science fiction or in Ancient Aliens, which is basically science fiction. So that's a big part. But I do want to just quickly cover why this is the last section of this episode that we do, Tom, which is called the part where Tristan makes you sad.
Oh no!
This is it. Oh, glasses are coming off.
Well, glasses off. I've got to get prepared for this.
Yeah.
The reason I do this is because by this point in the episode, we're usually having a lot of fun at the ridiculousness of the thing we're covering and not realize, and it's important to sort of take a step back and look at like how this is actually not just like wrong, but it's like bad,
harmful
for civilization, harmful. And in this case, I think that the biggest one is that this is yet another case, because we've talked about this several times on this show in the past. Every time they go to the Bible, it's always trying to diminish things from specifically the Hebrew Bible. And very often it's specifically powerful things that have to do with the covenant between God and the Jews. And so very often what you find in this story, and Jericho is no exception, that this is them taking a part of the Bible that is like an important cultural symbol and has a lot of significance to Jewish people, specifically as symbols of how much how much God like looks out for them and protects them, and being like, nah, man, you're not the love people by God. It was aliens, it was technology.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and very much like we've talked about how on this show, there's like, you don't have to go super far off of the ancient aliens mainstream narrative before you're getting to people who have interesting opinions about what was the good side of World War II. And so
Mm-hmm.
in this case, there's something very troubling to me where like this this ancient alien show, which is a very sanitized version of ancient astronaut theory and sort of like greater pseudo archaeology, but then which has like very distinct roots with like esoteric Nazism and all those kinds of things, and then having it sneak in a bunch of these things that seem almost targeted to specifically undermine the parts of biblical canon that specifically talk about how important Jews are to God and the divine.
Yeah,
And I
it's
think
because
that
it's
there's
funny too, just because when we were first starting doing this show, they made Ancient Aliens would often go to other different cultures and different religions and talk about like, oh, like these Hindu myths or something like that. Or those are clearly aliens, and stuff like that. But it was very rare that they would touch on the Bible, and so I was like, well, they're probably never going to touch on that because that would alienate some of their audience. But when they do, it's exclusively Old Testament. They never talk about New Testament. They never talk about Jesus was an alien or anything like that. But they'll talk about other people in the Old Testament that are, they're like an alien hybrid, or like they interacted with aliens and things like that. And it's sort of just, I don't know, it's like telling a little bit the amount that they're willing to.
And this is my own sort of observation that I picked up while researching this, and that in many times, like for example, Ark of the Covenant, the Manna Machine, and Jericho, they're all specifically stories that have to do with how special the Jews are to God, and the times when God came and protected the Jews in times of need, and about like a whole idea, because like as like Jewish theology, that the Jews are the chosen people of God, that he is like their protector and that he looks out for them. And these stories are specifically trying to disentangle those things, which I feel like has like, it's more than just like a simple just trying to like delve into whatever sounds sci-fi, but it seems like it's like a deliberate attempt to almost like remove the Jewish parts of the Bible, or at least diminish the parts that are specifically important to Jewish people. And in an age where we're having an increasingly normalization of anti-Semitism through through the rise of the far right that's been happening in the last few years, this, which came out over 10 years ago now, to me, like there's some part, and like how much the far right gets attracted to like conspiracy theories and like these like kind of like pseudo archaeological things. There's some, I feel like there's some sort of like anti-Semitic connection here that that when Ancient Aliens tries to avoid it and tries to be diplomatic, they don't acknowledge. But every time they go into the Bible, it seems like it's like they're parroting stuff that would appeal very much to people who want to disparage Jewish people and minimize their role in the Bible and in biblical canon and such like that. Furthermore, Jericho itself is like Judaism is an extremely it's a very academic religion, right? Like there's a lot of like rabbis are usually fairly highly educated. They have there's a lot of like theological debate and discussion, and Jericho has been a very like celebrated and studied Jewish story, and has like a really big part of like their faith and understanding of like divine commands and beliefs in God's ability to protect his people. And so like trivializing that not only is like taking away from like the story from the Bible, but like this conversation that has been happening in like in Jewish religious theology for thousands of years, and then just trying to reduce that to aliens. And I think that there's some, like, so it's not only taking like a really core thing away from like, you know, Jewish theology, but then it was also like, yeah, I think I'm talking in circles at this point. So
yeah.
And of course, it's also just part of the greater thing that I feel like I have to talk about in every episode, that like this is further erosion of like I would say that Ancient Aliens is going to have an interesting place in the history books of this period, because it's one of the many examples of the, as we're like seeing in this black swan after COVID, of like, how did so many people just like ignore all scientific like authority and all expertise and just kind of go with their vibes into like,
right.
you know, like as to the tune of like the death of like, you know, over 1 million people in America. And like, I don't even know what the current COVID death toll is. People aren't even counting it anymore. It's so sad. But like, how did that like kind of anti-intellectualism get so prevalent? And like, I feel like, you know, a show like this being really popular and doing really well, at least if I'm not going to say that it caused that, but it's indicative of degrading
part of a
belief
trend. Yeah,
it's part of a trend and at least once in every episode they'll say something like, mainstream archaeologists believe this, but others think a different theory, and then they'll do it. So
not
like
a cool renegade.
yeah, exactly. But us cool rebels over here, we think it's something else.
Yeah, and that's a story that now you hear parroted by like Naomi Wolf when she posts about how clouds aren't real, or like or any of the people like now these kinds of like like ignoring experts, disparaging experts, and going with your own explanation that is both stupid and wrong is now like basically mainstream conservative politics. So like we can kind of see like the kindling of that in like, I think this episode came out in like 2009.
Yeah,
so like
ago.
Yeah, but that's the fun. That's the fun.
Hey, we warned you. That was the part where Tristan makes you sad.
It's a cooler story though, isn't it? If they get a thing from the aliens, right?
It's so much cooler. It's so much cooler.
Just like, oh, there was an earthquake. Yawn.
Oh,
like,
earthquake. Oh, siege. Oh, boring. Aliens though?
Blow the magic horn.
Blow the magic horn. Well, I think we've all learned a valuable lesson today, and that lesson is that Veggie Tale rocks. And here's more of it.
It's plain to see. I can see. Your brains are very small to sing walking. Really knocking down our wall.
Jericho, what a fun
It's definitely
story.
an accent.
It's definitely
an accent.
It's definitely an accent. Incredible.
That's like the accent in like the far future where like, you know, like there was a time when the European Union was like, you know, at one point we're all going to just be like one super country. Like the, you know, the hardcore European Union fans like in the early days. That's like what the accent is of Europe in like the year 3000 after like the European Union has become one amalgamated country.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, hello, yes, it's nice to see you.
Well, I think that's our show, yeah?
Yeah. Tom,
thank you so much for being here and giving us your time and letting me play Veggie Tales for you.
Yeah. Can you tell us about your big documentary you got coming out soon?
It's been a pleasure. Yeah, I'm going out in a bit over a week's time to start filming a documentary called Boomers about the baby boom, about generational wars, about the ways in which age has become a sort of determining factor in various parts of our life in terms of wealth, power, etc. And yeah, that's going to be on Nebula in late October, we think, but got to film it yet. So yeah, I'm flying off next week. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, and in the meantime, what other Tom Nicholas stuff should they be checking out?
If you go on youtube.com and search for Tom Nicholas, I should come up, and I have some videos that I've made over the years. One or two of which are hopefully, okay.
Yeah, they're great. They're fantastic videos.
Yeah. You went on like a multi-day, extremely like tense road trip to show how neoliberalism is destroying cities. Like,
yeah, that was good.
Or just 2 videos about vapes.
It was good fun. It was a lot of driving. But yeah, no, we went to loads of cities to talk about how a lot of British cities going bankrupt at the moment because it turns out if you don't have any money coming in, you have to just cut all your public services and then things get even worse. But that was good fun. Yeah, you can watch that one. You can watch one about disposable vapes and addiction and about geopolitics. Yeah, there's loads.
There's loads. They're all great. As someone who makes videos and doesn't leave their house when making videos, I'm always constantly impressed by your production quality and like the locations that you get to film in, and it's very it all just looks really good, and it's also entertaining and well researched, well written. It's just good stuff.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
thank you.
High quality stuff. But Scott,
yeah,
if I really wanted to know a fact like whether or not Superman's new power is going to change the status quo,
oh my God,
I need to know where to go for that.
So Tristan does this bit at the end of every episode where he goes to like a video that's like 6 or 7 years old for me and tries to promote it. This one's 9 years old.
Yeah.
Oh my God. How long have I been doing YouTube? You can watch that video and other more current ones over on my channel, NerdSync, NERDSYNC. I make videos about comics and cartoons and really just anything that I'm interested in at the moment. Tristan, where can people find more of your stuff online?
You can go to the YouTube channel Step Back. I'm working on a video that I feel like it was really bad that I watched the new Dan Olsen video while writing the script because it's getting like more and more ambitious every single time I touch it, where now I'm gonna have to do like location scouting and get like
that's
some
the issue.
characters.
That's the issue with watching when you watch talented people's videos, you're just like, but how can I make mine better like theirs are?
Yeah. So I'm needing my next video has like a whole escape room storyline now that I'm gonna try and do.
Oh, excellent.
So well, I mean, I have to actually write the video, so maybe laziness will prevail at the end of the day. But it's about private equity and like how there's a sort of like phase change happening in the economy right now, where like the economy is cannibalizing itself, and what that means, and what a certain book that I keep on my desk from like the 1800s says about why the economy is doing it this way. I'm holding up a copy of Capital.
Gotcha. It was hard to see because the Zoom call kept trying to blur it. And that's Step Back is your channel. I can't remember if you said it.
The video is going to actually feature this book, which I'm going to be talking to the ghost of Karl Marx, who is haunting a copy of Capital, a Penguin Classics copy of Capital.
Good find. That's good that you got him on the episode. You can support this. You can support this podcast over on patreon.com/probsnotaliens. That really helps us out. Or if you're a Nebula subscriber already, we have episodes up on Nebula 1 week early. That's nebula.tv/probablynotaliens. You can leave reviews of this show on anything that you're listening to, any podcast player you're listening on. You can tell your friends about the show. That also helps, and a great place to send people is probsnotaliens.com. It's got links to everywhere where you can listen to the show and support us and all that good stuff. Thank you once again, Tom, for being here. This has been great fun, I think that's it. So until next time, my name is Scott Nicewander. And then, if you want to say your name there.
My name's Tom Nicholas.
We didn't prepare you.
I'm Tristan Johnson, and the truth is out there. The first bit I can think of is to yell probably as loud as I possibly can.
Oh, right.
For this thing. But probably!
Probably.
But I also don't want to clip the mic.
Probably.
There you go.
That'll work. All right.
Bring down cities with our
loud voices.
Powerful songs.
Excellent podcasts.